It was a stormy Halloween night, and I was hanging out with 3 of my friends, Jake, Mia, and Kevin. None of us really had any plans, so we were just sitting around, trying to think of something to do. That's when I remembered I had an old Ouija board in my closet. Everyone agreed to give it a try. I wanted it to be funny, but also kind of spooky, so I lit 3 candles, turned off all the lights, and set the board on the table. The 4 of us sat down and placed our hands on the pointer. We started off with the usual question, "Is anyone here?" The pointer slowly began to move. We all burst out laughing when it spelled Y-E-S. Jake and I started asking silly questions, things like, "Will you haunt Mia?" She kept telling us to stop, clearly uncomfortable, but when the board spelled Y-E-S again, everyone cracked up even more. Honestly, I wasn't moving the pointer at all. I figured Jake or Kevin were the ones doing it, just to mess with us. But then, without anyone asking another question, the pointer started sliding on its own, spelling out, "I am inside the house." We laughed again, thinking it was part of the joke, until a loud, heavy thud echoed from directly above us as if someone stomped hard on the floor upstairs. All of us jumped. Mia screamed and completely lost it. The rest of us just looked at each other, unsure whether to laugh or panic. My parents weren't home that night, and we didn't have any pets, so there was no one else in the house. That's when the doorbell suddenly rang. We froze. Then I went to the front door and peeked through the peephole. It was just a father and his little kid out trick-or-treating under an umbrella. I handed the kids some candy, wished them a happy Halloween, and closed the door. But as soon as I turned around, all I could think about was that sound upstairs. I convinced everyone to come with me to check. We walked up to the 2nd floor, the only light coming from a small nightlight plugged into the hallway outlet. Halfway down the hall, we reached my parents' bedroom, the room that sat directly above where we had been using the board. That's when we all heard it, a girl's voice. None of us could make out what she said, but we all heard it, clearly. Then something fell to the floor with a dull thud. Mia and Kevin immediately bolted downstairs, completely silent but terrified. Jake and I stayed behind staring at each other before slowly approaching the door. I turned the handle and gently pushed it open. The room was pitch dark, but in the far corner, I could make out a tall figure standing completely still. I slammed the door shut and we both ran downstairs as fast as we could. Back in the living room, we turned all the lights on and noticed something strange. One of the 3 candles by the Ouija board had gone out. I grabbed my phone and called the police. A few minutes later, an officer arrived. I led him upstairs to my parents' room and pointed to the door. He knocked, announced himself, and then opened it quickly, flipping on the light. He checked the closet under the bed. Nothing. No one was there. We joined him and looked through every room upstairs, every closet, every bathroom. There was absolutely nowhere for anyone to hide. After the officer left, we decided to get rid of the Ouija board for good. We tossed it into the neighbor's garbage bin and went to sit under the awning in my backyard, listening to the rain pour down, none of us saying a word. When my parents finally came home, we told them the whole story together. They believed us, or at least pretended to, but there wasn't much they could really do about it. That night, I barely slept, and I can promise I will never touch a Ouija board again. It was Halloween night, and I was looking forward to a party being held at a friend's apartment off campus. It was a costume event, and everyone there seemed to be having a good time. The place was crowded, music was playing, and the overall atmosphere was just fun and lively. I spent a few hours there, chatting and laughing with people, until I finally decided to call it a night. By the time I left, it was around 1 a.m. After saying goodbye to everyone, I headed to my car. The drive home usually took about 20 minutes. As I was pulling out of the parking lot, I noticed another vehicle leaving at the same time. They turned the same direction I did, but I didn't think anything of it at first. For most of the drive, things felt normal. But after a while, I started realizing that the same car had been behind me the entire time, following a little too closely. It wasn't aggressive at first, but the distance between us stayed tight. I started wondering if it was just coincidence or something else. To find out, I decided to test it. I took a few random turns, hoping to see if the car would keep following each time. I turned, they did TOO. That's when I started to feel uneasy. The road I was on was not very busy, and it was late, so there weren't any other cars around. The headlights behind me were bright enough to fill the inside of my car with light, and in my rearview mirror, I could make out the shape of the driver, but not any clear details. I pressed a little harder on the gas, trying to put some space between us, but the other car sped up to match my pace. I took a sharp right onto a dirt road that led toward a small park nearby, thinking maybe I could lose them through the curves. But even there, they stayed right behind me. I knew I couldn't drive straight home. I didn't want whoever it was to know where I lived. So instead, I looped back around, trying to get to a main road where there might be people or lights. That's when things got worse. The car behind me began swerving, trying to come up alongside mine. It looked like they were attempting to push me off the road. I thought about grabbing my phone to call for help, but I didn't dare take my eyes off the road for even a second. I swerved to avoid them once, but they came back again, getting close enough to make me panic. When they tried to sideswipe me a second time, I hit my brakes, hard. My sudden stop threw them ahead of me, and their car veered out of control, sliding off the road and crashing into a ditch. I didn't get out right away. My heart was pounding, and part of me wanted to drive off immediately, but another part hesitated. I stayed there for a few seconds, watching to see if the driver would move. Then the door opened and someone climbed out. The person stood up facing me. They were wearing a full Grim Reaper costume, long black cloak, mask and all. That's when it clicked that they had probably been at the same costume party earlier. Maybe they had followed me from there. Once I saw that they were still standing and moving, I didn't stick around to find out anything else. I hit the gas and drove away, heading straight back to my apartment. When I got inside, I locked the door immediately and called the police. I explained what had happened and gave them the location of the crash. Later on, I found out from the police that when they got to the scene, the person in the costume was gone, and the car they had been driving turned out to be stolen. That detail unsettled me even more. For a while after that, I was nervous every time I got into my car. I kept thinking about how the driver had followed me for so long, and that they probably knew what my car looked like, maybe even my license plate. Thankfully, I never saw or heard anything from them again, but that night still sticks in my mind every Halloween. On Halloween, there was an old abandoned mental hospital in our town that had become a hangout spot for rowdy teenagers. Every year, kids would sneak in to drink, spray graffiti, and make a mess with silly string. Eventually, the town authorities got fed up. By that Halloween, when my friends Leo, Matt, and I decided we wanted to explore it, the place had been heavily secured. Every window on the first floor was covered with metal bars, and extra guards were stationed around the property. We didn't know that at first. After cutting through the woods, we saw security shouting at a group of teens, telling them to go home. But we weren't ready to give up. We circled around through the trees to another side of the property where it was quieter. That's where we hopped the fence and started looking for another way in. Every window we checked had been sealed with thick steel bars. As we were searching, we could hear voices and movement from other parts of the property, but somehow we managed to stay unnoticed. We kept sneaking around until Leo spotted a window that wasn't sealed with metal, but instead covered with wooden boards. Since we were all wearing boots, kicking the planks off seemed doable. The problem was the window was too high to reach, so Matt and I lifted Leo up and basically used him and his boots as a battering ram. Luckily, the wood was damp and rotten, so it broke pretty easily. We tore off the rest of the boards, and just like that, we had a way inside. We knew we had to move quickly before security spotted us. Leo climbed in first since he was the smallest. Then Matt and I followed, pulling ourselves up through the ledge. Inside, the floor was covered in junk and broken pieces of debris. I grabbed a long wooden plank and leaned it across the window to cover it up, hiding the entry point. Now we were inside, three of us, alone in a massive, pitch-dark mental hospital on Halloween night. Matt had brought a few spray paint cans in his backpack that he planned to use, but first we had to find a spot for it. He also brought 3 flashlights, one for each of us. Stepping from the cold, windy night into the silent interior felt strange, like all sound just vanished. We decided to head to the upper floors, maybe even find a way to the roof. As we explored, The place felt completely deserted. It didn't seem like anyone else had found a way in. We eventually found a stairwell and climbed up several flights, maybe around 6 floors in total. There was one more level above us, the roof access, but these stairs didn't go that high, so we started searching for another set that would. As we walked through a long corridor, a loud bang echoed from somewhere down the hall. All of us turned our flashlights toward the sound, but the hallway stretched too far to see anything. It was clear we were not alone. Thinking it could be security, we turned and went the opposite way. We checked through a few connected halls, trying to stay quiet. I was walking last and occasionally looked back mostly out of habit. After we turned a corner, I heard the sound of wood cracking behind me. When I turned, I saw someone's head peeking out from around a doorway, watching us. The moment I noticed, they ducked back out of sight. I called out, maybe to my friends, maybe to that person, not even sure myself. My friends turned around as I pointed, but when we checked the spot, no one was there. They thought I was joking, but I knew I wasn't imagining it. Someone else was in there. We kept moving until we reached a part of the floor that had almost completely collapsed, only a narrow strip of wood still connecting the two sides. Leo insisted on going first and volunteered to cross. It wasn't that far of a drop, maybe into what used to be a bathroom. We pressed our shoes against the wall and held onto a pipe running along the upper side for support. I crossed last, but as I got halfway across, I realized my friends hadn't waited for me. They had already disappeared down the hallway. Just then, I felt something grab the back of my shoe. At first I thought maybe it was one of them trying to scare me, but that didn't make sense. They couldn't have reached from below that fast. My flashlight wasn't in my hand, so I couldn't see anything, and the hallway ahead was completely dark. I screamed louder than I ever have in my life. My friends came running back, shining their flashlights toward the hole. As soon as the light hit, whatever had grabbed me let go, and we heard footsteps running somewhere below. None of us wanted to look down or figure out WHO or what it was. I yelled for them to come with me, and we rushed down the stairs, all the way back to the ground floor. That's when we realized another problem. We had no idea how to get out. The only window that wasn't sealed with metal was the one we came through, and we had covered it up earlier. We started running around, trying to retrace our steps. The place felt like a maze, and every corner we turned, I expected to see that same face again. And then we did. As I led the way, I spotted someone at the far end of the hallway, standing half hidden behind a wall, watching us. This time I could see clearly that they were wearing a mask. Whether it was the same person who grabbed me, I'll never know, but I didn't doubt it. We turned and ran in the opposite direction, not stopping until we found the window we had entered through. Getting out was easier than climbing in. Once outside, we noticed the chaos had mostly cleared. Security must have already kicked out the other trespassers. We thought about finding a guard to tell them someone dangerous might still be inside, but that would mean admitting we broke in. So instead, we sprinted back through the woods to the car. The rest of the night, we sat in a parking lot talking about what happened. That was how our Halloween went in 2016.